Just moments ago, Buckingham Palace echoed with gasps not of sorrow, but of thunderous applause. King Charles, in a move that shocked courtiers and electrified the royal household, officially denied the long-speculated Duchess title to Camilla's daughter. But the real shock? The royal staff didn't mourn the decision, they cheered. Why would such a private, calculated act erupt into internal celebration? What dark history lies beneath the polished surface of royal smiles? Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The official statement arrived not with a grand announcement or a televised address, but through a deliberate and sharply worded communication delivered to key members of the royal press. It was short, precise, and laced with unmistakable finality. Camilla's daughter would not, under any circumstances, be granted the title of Duchess. The move, shocking in its boldness, was anything but spontaneous. Insiders have confirmed that the timing of this pronouncement was no accident. It was orchestrated to coincide with a high-stakes internal council meeting involving senior royal advisors and select family members. What followed behind the palace gates stunned even the most seasoned insiders. Staff, many of whom had served through decades of royal upheaval, were reportedly seen clapping quietly, some even smiling with visible relief as the news swept through the corridors of Clarence House and Windsor. One staff member, anonymously quoted, called it a restoration of royal honour, but jubilation in one corner of the monarchy meant devastation in another. Within minutes of the announcement, tremors began to rattle through Camilla's inner circle. Advisors scrambled, phones lit up, and courtiers loyal to the Queen Consort began damage control. The optics of Charles publicly rejecting Camilla's daughter's ascension to Duchess weren't just bruising, they were volcanic. What followed only intensified the spectacle. Leaked footage, likely from a disgruntled aide, captured Camilla, leaving the west wing of the palace in a visible storm, her face ashen, her stride sharp and defiant. The woman once dubbed the unshakable matriarch was clearly shaken. What's even more riveting is the emotional complexity behind the king's decision. Insiders close to Charles describe him as resolute but emotional. For months, if not years, he'd wrestled with the weight of public expectations, historical precedent, and private allegiance. The pressure to maintain royal continuity while appeasing his wife's wishes had reached a boiling point, and this moment was the release. Some say he looked haunted in the hours following the announcement. Others believe he finally looked free. But to understand why this single act provoked such visceral reactions from cheers to fury, we must pull back the velvet curtain and confront the painful legacy that led to this very moment. For years, Camilla operated in whispers, placing her family closer and closer to the crown's flame. While the world watched William and Catherine rise, Camilla was busy carving an invisible path for her daughter, carefully orchestrating introductions, charity roles, and royal proximity. But what few realized was how deeply this unnerved the traditionalists behind palace doors. It began subtly. Camilla's daughter started showing up at royal engagements with no official titles, yet full access. She was introduced as a guest, a supporter, a family companion, but never as a formal royal. Still, her presence was unmistakably strategic. Over time, staff began noticing a slow but unmistakable shift. She wasn't merely attending, she was being positioned. Seating charts were quietly adjusted to place her closer to senior royals. Access to exclusive events became routine. Even her styling, guided by palace-linked consultants, began reflecting the regal polish expected of titled women. To the public, it looked incidental. To insiders, it looked like preparation. Behind the scenes, the pressure mounted. According to high-level aides, Camilla had privately petitioned Charles not once, but 3 separate times over the past decade, urging him to formally grant her daughter a noble title. Each time, the appeal was framed delicately as a symbol of inclusion, of modern family unity. But beneath the surface, it carried the weight of legacy. For Camilla, it was not just about recognition, it was about cementing a place within royal history for her bloodline. And yet, With each request, the opposition grew louder. Senior royals who had long tolerated Camilla's rise began drawing quiet lines in the sand. Princess Anne, never one for political theatre, is said to have made her stance clear in private. Elevation must be earned, not gifted through sentiment. Her voice was echoed by others, who saw Camilla's maneuvering as a threat to the delicate structure that bound the monarchy together: tradition, duty, and heritage. Most vocal, though not publicly, was Catherine's circle. For them, this move wasn't just inappropriate, it was dangerous. If titles could be extended based on marriage ties alone, what was to stop a complete unraveling of the bloodline principle that safeguarded the monarchy's stability? Staff whispered what the family dared not say aloud. Camilla was building a dynasty within a dynasty, and with each small victory, each invitation, each appearance, each flattering press mention, the quiet anxiety grew louder. There was a sense that something sacred was being altered, not shattered in one dramatic blow, but eroded slowly, almost imperceptibly, until one day the crown might sit upon a head no royal blood had earned. But it wasn't just ambition that soured the palace air, it was the perception of betrayal, of secrets passed in private chambers, and of a dangerous legacy hidden in plain sight. Before her passing, Queen Elizabeth left behind more than crowns and corgis. Inside her final private papers, now reportedly uncovered, was a handwritten note addressed to King Charles, a haunting reminder of the crown's sacred lineage. And at the heart of that note, a subtle but firm warning: protect the bloodline, do not confuse affection with succession. In the days following the Queen's funeral, whispers among royal aides hinted at something extraordinary: a sealed envelope delivered in silence to King Charles. Not part of the official estate, not mentioned in any legal documents, but passed directly from Elizabeth's most trusted confidant to her son's trembling hands. That envelope, small in size but colossal in consequence, was said to contain her final instruction, a personal directive, more intimate than any royal charter. At first, Charles kept it unopened, too burdened by grief, too surrounded by formality. But when he finally did read it alone in the misty silence of Balmoral, it hit like a thunderclap. The note was not dramatic, nor was it emotional. It was measured, cold, royal. In it, the Queen reaffirmed the monarchy's foundation, the bloodline. She reminded Charles that the institution did not bend for convenience, for love, or for modern sensibilities. Succession and legitimacy, she wrote, must remain untouched by affection. While Camilla had been welcomed, however controversially, her children were never part of the monarchy's lineage. That line must never be blurred. In one chilling sentence, Elizabeth laid down her expectation: titles must remain sacred. Let no crown be worn by those without sovereign inheritance. That message pierced Charles deeper than any crown ever could. Here was the woman who had ruled for 70 years, now reaching from beyond the grave to steer the monarchy she had fiercely protected. For weeks, perhaps months, he said nothing. And most telling of all, he paused all discussions around Camilla's daughter's title. According to palace insiders, Camilla grew increasingly agitated, unable to understand the sudden hesitation from her husband, who had once seemed open to legitimizing her daughter's place. The emotional toll on Charles became evident. During a rare, unaccompanied stay at Balmoral, he was said to have wandered the estate in deep thought, clutching the envelope like a relic. Those few staff who caught a glimpse of him during that time described a man torn between two thrones, one built on duty, the other on devotion. In the end, it was his mother's words that broke the stalemate. When he returned to London, his face had hardened, his tone had changed, and his resolve was unmistakable. The title would not be granted. Not now. Not ever. And so, while the world saw a simple act of royal decision-making, the truth ran much deeper. It was Elizabeth, the unseen architect of stability, who made the final call from the shadows. Yet even the Queen's ghostly guidance couldn't prepare the monarchy for the internal uprising about to erupt from the shadows of royal corridors. They serve in silence. But on this day, the staff of Windsor and Clarence House made their voices heard, not in protest, but in jubilation. For years, whispers of mistreatment, entitlement, and quiet disdain had flowed from Camilla's private circle. But when the title was denied, those who'd endured behind palace walls saw it as justice finally served. Behind the grandeur of royal halls, the truth had been simmering for years. Anonymous whispers passed between corridors, knowing glances exchanged in gilded rooms. Now, former royal aides are finally speaking, some under anonymity, their words thick with the weight of what they endured. They recall moments when Camilla's daughter acted with an air of unspoken authority, issuing instructions to royal staff, rearranging orders, and commanding presence as though her title had already been printed in gold. These weren't isolated incidents, they say they were patterns that bred resentment and confusion. The staff knew where their loyalty lay, but increasingly they were caught between tradition and intrusion. There were reported moments of tension that never reached the tabloids, deliberate shifts in seating protocols, verbal reprimands issued to long-serving aides, and a growing expectation of deference without merit. A butler who had served the family for decades was allegedly dismissed after quietly refusing to adjust a seating plan at a private dinner, one that Camilla's daughter insisted favoured her image. The request, he said, wasn't royal, it was arrogant, and he paid the price. Staff began to refer to her, half mockingly, half fearfully, as the Duchess without a crown. In stark contrast, those same aides speak with quiet reverence about Catherine. They recall how she learned the names of cleaners and cooks, how she offered kindness without spectacle. Her assent was earned, they say grace met with gratitude. And it was that contrast which made the pain of serving Camilla's side of the family harder to bear. Behind the palace gates, favoritism wasn't just visible, it was visceral. So when the news broke that King Charles had officially denied the title, it wasn't received with shock, it was received like rain after drought. Silent nods became whispered cheers, and whispered cheers became outright applause in corners of Clarence House. The decision wasn't just symbolic, it was personal. It validated the unspoken struggles of those who had endured the slow erosion of protocol under the weight of unchecked ambition. An internal memo, quietly circulated after the announcement, revealed an unexpected shift. Staff morale had surged. For the first time in years, many said, it felt like the royal order had been restored. The hierarchy, once blurred, was now sharp again. The message was clear. Titles are earned, not assumed. Dignity must not be demanded, it must be deserved. But what began as silent approval soon ignited deeper divisions, turning family against family and loyalty into weaponized memory. As the decision rippled across the royal estate, eyes turned not to Charles but to William and Catherine. Whispers suggest the Prince and Princess of Wales were not only supportive of the move, but may have helped orchestrate it. Was this the first major test of power in the silent battle for the future of the crown? Behind the tightly guarded doors of Kensington Palace, strategy had already been unfolding. Weeks before the announcement that shattered Camilla's quiet ambitions, William reportedly requested a private audience with his father, no aides, no distractions, just father and son in a conversation that would shift the monarchy's internal dynamics. While the public believed Charles was acting alone, those close to the inner circle knew better. William had presented a stark argument. He spoke not only as a son, but as a future king. To grant Camilla's daughter a title would, in his words, plant confusion at the heart of the institution. It wasn't about personal disdain, it was about the survival of the monarchy's message. Catherine, calm yet resolute, had long warned against what she called the slow dilution of legacy. In private, she voiced concerns that the line between royal and extended family was becoming dangerously blurred. A Duchess title, she argued, would not just be a gift, it would be a symbol. And symbols, in the monarchy, are everything. Allowing Camilla's daughter to bear one without lineage would open a door the crown may never be able to close again. She feared a future where blood no longer defined royalty, where sentiment began to rewrite succession. And in those fears, she found an ally in perhaps the most unlikely place, Princess Anne. The Princess Royal, never one to entertain theatrics or soften her stance, agreed. Between the three, William, Catherine and Anne, a quiet coalition emerged. Not a rebellion, but a reminder. A reminder that tradition, however outdated it may seem to some, is what separates monarchy from monarchy in name only. Together, they urged Charles to weigh the long-term consequences, to think beyond family peace and consider what the monarchy would look like in 10, 20, 50 years. The answer, they believed, was clear. Blending families should never mean blending bloodlines. And then came the sentence that cut through the fog words reportedly delivered by William himself during that pivotal meeting. Don't let love undo the crown's design. A soft plea wrapped in iron. A message to a king still navigating the fragile aftermath of a lifetime of controversy. It wasn't an ultimatum, but it was a boundary. Camilla, upon discovering the decision and the forces behind it, was said to be stunned. But when she learned who had stood behind Charles in solidarity, her stepson, her stepdaughter-in-law, and Princess Anne, the betrayal took on a deeper hue. Not only had her wishes been denied, but by those she once believed were neutral. In the quiet isolation that followed, her inner circle began to shrink. Fewer invitations, fewer calls. She remained queen consort in title, but within the palace walls, her influence had shifted dramatically. But if Charles's denial fractured the present, what emerged next would tear open the past, a secret that had been buried since Camilla first entered the royal picture. Long before Charles and Camilla married, there was a whispered agreement, one never officially recorded, but widely known among select royal confidants. Diana's memory still lingered, and her children watched every move. One condition kept Charles's second marriage palatable to the public, and the palace alike. Her family will never carry royal titles. It was an unspoken vow, forged in compromise, wrapped in grief, and sealed with caution. At the time, the monarchy was still reeling from the seismic fallout of Diana's death, and the public mood had not forgiven. Camilla's presence was tolerated, but acceptance came with strict conditions. Senior courtiers remember the quiet negotiations that followed the Queen's reluctant blessing. The monarchy could survive a second marriage, yes, but only under strict boundaries. Camilla could be welcomed, but not crowned in the way Diana had been. Her children could be acknowledged, but never elevated. The firm, bruised and bloodied from decades of scandal, needed to preserve what little trust it had left with the public. That meant drawing a firm line between legacy and lifestyle. Titles, status, and visibility were part of that line. The Queen, ever protective of the crown's symbolism, made it clear. No blurring of bloodlines. Diana's shadow loomed large over the entire agreement. Her legacy wasn't just one of heartbreak and paparazzi flashbulbs, it was one of fierce public loyalty. The people had claimed her, and by extension, her sons. William and Harry were seen as the rightful heirs to her truth. Any attempt to elevate Camilla's family would not only provoke controversy, it would feel like erasure. So the unofficial pact was sealed. Camilla would rise, but her family would remain on the periphery. No titles, no succession, no illusions. For years, this balance held. But as Camilla's role evolved from companion to consort, the boundary began to blur. Quietly, she tested the waters, placing her daughter in rooms reserved for royals, pushing for inclusion under the guise of modern family dynamics. And for a while, it worked. The monarchy, eager to avoid more fractures, let it slide. But the denial of the Duchess title served as a sharp reminder. The past had not been forgotten. Charles's decision was not just an act of authority, it was an act of remembrance. A promise, however silent, had been kept. And many believe it was Diana's enduring presence alive through her sons and echoed in Catherine's steadfast devotion to royal duty that ultimately anchored the choice. In Catherine, many see the continuation of Diana's values, grace under pressure, commitment to the people, and an unwavering respect for tradition. Her quiet strength has become the monarchy's moral compass, one that holds the institution together when sentiment threatens to unravel it. And with the title denied, the message was crystal clear. Legacy must always outweigh loyalty to comfort, but in the aftermath of duty comes the danger of resentment, and Camilla, now cornered, begins to strike back. They say revenge in the monarchy is served with tea and smiles. Camilla may have remained silent in public, but behind closed doors, the Queen Consort began shifting pieces on a very different board. Staff changes, cold shoulders, and most alarmingly, renewed connections with media allies she once used to shape public opinion. What began as shock and humiliation quickly transformed into silent strategy. Camilla, blindsided by the denial of a title she had long considered inevitable, began quietly tightening her inner circle. One of her first moves was administrative but symbolic, requesting the reassignment of several long-serving staff members, those reportedly seen clapping or congratulating Catherine's aides after the announcement. Though couched in bureaucratic language, the message was unmistakable. Disloyalty would not be tolerated. The Queen Consort was done playing nicely. At a recent joint appearance, where Catherine and Camilla were scheduled to appear side by side, insiders described the atmosphere as glacial. Smiles for the cameras, yes, but beneath them, sharp tension. Catherine, dignified and unreadable, held her poise. Camilla, however, was visibly restrained. A senior aide later confided, "It was the first time I saw her treat Catherine not as a daughter-in-law, but as a rival." Soon after, tabloid stories began to trickle out pieces, painting Catherine in a colder light than usual. Subtle but strategic. Headlines that hinted she was unyielding, difficult, even controlling. Though the articles didn't directly accuse, the subtext was clear. It was classic media maneuvering. Those close to the press recognized the fingerprints. One senior media correspondent, once aligned with Camilla's camp during the height of her public rehabilitation, revealed that private lunches had resumed. Calls had been made. The Queen Consort, it seemed, was quietly rebuilding her arsenal. Meanwhile, Camilla's daughter all but vanished from public engagements. No longer present at charity events, her name erased from internal guest lists, and her face noticeably absent from royal coverage. This sudden withdrawal only fueled speculation. Others believe it was punishment, even exile, for becoming the catalyst of a royal rupture that Camilla could not contain. Inside the palace, the mood turned uneasy. Officials began drawing comparisons to the 1990s, the height of the Diana Charles press wars. Old patterns, they feared, were returning. Carefully timed leaks, passive-aggressive coverage, and the resurrection of factions. Some believed Camilla wanted to reassert her place, not just in the family, but in the court of public opinion. Others whispered that it wasn't just about a title, it was about revenge, legacy, and fear that her influence was slipping away for good. Yet amidst this storm, one unexpected royal rises not in vengeance but in grace, commanding attention through quiet defiance. While others battled for influence, Catherine stood still, and in that stillness, power moved to her. The staff adored her, the people trusted her, and King Charles saw in her the future his mother dreamed of preserving. She said nothing publicly about the denied title, but her poised silence spoke louder than any crown. In a world where whispers often carry more weight than proclamations, Catherine's silence became her statement. She did not gloat, she did not retaliate, she simply remained. And the monarchy, shaken by internal fractures and public scrutiny, gravitated toward her like a compass finds north. As Camilla's circle faltered and faded, Catherine's light grew steadier, casting a quiet strength that no scandal could erode. In the wake of the Duchess' denial, her composure was seen not as passive, but as profoundly principled. The press, once eager to scrutinize her every gesture, shifted their tone, praising her grace under pressure, her refusal to engage in palace politics, and the strength she exhibited by simply choosing dignity. Behind palace walls, a different story was quietly unfolding. Internal documents, rarely seen beyond the monarch's closest advisors, had begun to list Catherine under a new heading, strategic advisor. In meetings once dominated by men of lineage and legacy, her voice was not only present, it was requested. She offered insight, not through ambition, but through empathy. She understood the institution, but more importantly, she understood the people. And that understanding made her indispensable. While Camilla's family found themselves increasingly distanced, Catherine's children were being subtly brought forward. Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis began appearing more regularly at key events, guided not by spectacle, but by purpose. The contrast between the two royal bloodlines had never been sharper. While Camilla's daughter vanished from view, Catherine's family stepped confidently into the light. Not by force, not by demand, but by acceptance. Senior royals, many of whom had remained neutral during the earlier battles, began privately referring to Catherine as the moral centre of the modern monarchy. The Queen in waiting, not just by title, but by temperament. And yet, it wasn't just her public composure that cemented her rising power. Behind the scenes, she played the role of quiet bridge builder. When Charles and William found themselves at odds in the aftermath of the decision, it was Catherine who softened the distance. She brought perspective where pride once stood. She reminded both men of the burden they carried not as rulers, but as symbols. And in doing so, she helped restore a fragile unity that the monarchy desperately needed to survive. Without asking, she was being handed the reins of something far greater than influence. She was becoming the quiet force shaping the monarchy's future. Her leadership was not announced, it was earned. Not declared, it was felt. And with each passing day, it became clear that the monarchy, in its most vulnerable moment, was beginning to center around her. Not with noise, not with fury, but with purpose. But as one chapter closes with grace, another creaks open, revealing a final act that could forever redefine what it means to be royal. Just when the dust seemed to settle, a sealed document emerged hidden in the archives of a former royal legal advisor. It suggests Camilla was once granted provisional rights to request a title for her daughter, but only upon unanimous approval by the sovereign and two heirs. With Charles divided and William firmly opposed, could Prince George be the tiebreaker in a battle yet to come? The revelation hit like a thunderclap behind palace walls. For years, the question of Camilla's daughter's title had appeared resolved until a forgotten clause, buried in the royal prerogative files, forced the discussion wide open again. The clause, dated just before Charles and Camilla's wedding, granted a narrow window for title consideration, but only if 3 individuals agreed: the reigning monarch, the direct heir, and the heir's heir. In effect, Charles, William, and Prince George. The implications were seismic. It meant the issue wasn't over. It was suspended, awaiting a future vote that could fracture the monarchy once more. Inside the palace, the debate ignited instantly. Some senior advisors called for the clause to be discreetly removed from official records, arguing that leaving it intact would embolden future attempts by Camilla's camp. Others urged caution, fearing that tampering with legacy documents would provoke backlash if ever discovered. Meanwhile, attention shifted to the youngest royal, with a vote that might one day matter: Prince George. At just 13, he remained unaware of the power he could eventually hold. But those around him did not share his innocence. Catherine, now more than ever, took an active role in her son's quiet grooming, not in ceremony, but in character, teaching him the weight of choices, the meaning of duty, and the discipline of silence. Those closest to the family noted the shift. George was no longer just being raised as a prince, he was being shaped as a king. And should the time come when the clause is invoked, his vote will either cement his mother's legacy or resurrect a battle his grandfather tried to bury. Speculation is already mounting. Would George uphold the sacred boundaries of lineage, or would he be swayed by the politics of family loyalty and royal reconciliation? One palace source phrased it simply: the question isn't if the clause will be used, it's when. Because in the monarchy, no door is ever truly closed, no war ever fully won. Everything remains waiting, watching, lingering beneath the surface. As the monarchy stands at a precipice between legacy and loyalty, one truth remains within the walls of the palace: titles may be denied, but power always finds a way. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.